Hi, and thanks for logging on to the daily DVAR halacha. And here's a brand new halacha for us from Monday, the 23rd day of November. Here we go. If you have two people that are eating, person A is eating a dairy meal and person B is eating a meat meal, and they're both at the same table, that's a problem. If they're going to share the table together, then what could happen is one of them could end up being in the dairy meal and munch a piece of something, meat from the other person's plate. And of course, that would be a terrible problem. So, two people who are eating opposite, one eating dairy, one eating meat, should not be sharing a table. If they are strangers, do not know each other at all, and they're not apt to share each other's stuff because they're strangers, then it is considered okay. But two acquaintances who want to sit on the same table would not be able to do that without, well, there'll be exceptions in just a minute, but generally, before the exceptions, they're not allowed to do it because one could, due to the friendliness, could inadvertently end up eating something from the other person's stash and end up eating meat while he's eating really a dairy meal, or vice versa. Now, if they are acquaintances and they want to do this somehow, then they could make certain signs or exceptional things happen, which would make it permissible. Like, for example, they could have separate tablecloths. One is eating on a tablecloth that's clearly a meat tablecloth with his meat meal. The other one's eating on a dairy tablecloth that's a dairy tablecloth for his dairy meal, and that'll make it very clear what's being done, and it'll stop the inadvertent sharing of food, and that's going to make it okay. Similarly, they could have one using the meat tablecloth and the other one just using the table itself, which is milchiks, and that too would be enough of a sign. Same kind of thing could be done with placemats, where they're on separate placemats, or one's on a fleshik placemat with his fleshik meal, and the other person, the other friend, is eating on the tabletop, which is a dairy tabletop, and that too would remind them to not mess up. They can also put an object between them that's like a little bit unusual to be there, like a pencil sharpener, and that would serve as a reminder, like, why is there a pencil sharpener between us? That'd be a constant reminder that that their meals are separate and that they won't be reaching into each other's plates, and that would make it okay. But it must be something that is of sufficient size that you'd notice it and it would remind you. If the two of them are eating far enough apart that they're not going to reach into each other's plates, then that too would be enough to make it permissible. In general, a little different piece of this topic. If you are having a dairy meal, just you alone, it's not appropriate to have a dairy meal on a table where there's somehow a meat dish just sitting there, because the same kind of problem could happen. So don't put a meat something on the table of a dairy meal because you're asking for trouble. If it's a large table and the meat part is far at the other end of the table, well, then yes, it is fine, but just make sure that it's like that. If you want to use the same table, now we're talking one after the other. Like, person A is eating at 5 o'clock a dairy meal on the table, and it's all cold. And then at 6 o'clock, any other person, doesn't matter who, wants to eat a meat meal at that very same table, also with cold items. So a wipe down between the two meals of the table, one wipe down of the table would be enough, because since it's all cold, just if you clearly wipe down the table and there's nothing remaining from the previous meal, it's all going to be okay. But the common custom is to not rely on that, and more commonly what people do is they try to have a different arrangement. Like, they'll have, let's say that kitchen table is milchiks, and all dairy stuff is eaten right on the kitchen table, and if they ever want to use that kitchen table for meat, they'll just throw a meat tablecloth onto the table. That's the more common way to do this, because hot food is going to end up in a lot of the meals, and just relying on the wipe down in between, even though it's cold, is something we'd rather not rely on if we don't have to. So try to decide, like, that the table's going to be, let's say, dairy, and whenever you're eating fleshiks at that table, you'll put a fleshiks tablecloth over it. Thanks for logging on. Log on again tomorrow for more. Bye-bye.